Hello, computer.
This is Hello Computer, a series of interviews carried out in 2023, at a time when artificial intelligence appears to be going everywhere all at once. Our next interview is with Sam Illingworth, an expert in higher education and science communication, who has some strong views about how AI can change the global education system.
My name's Sam Illingworth, or Dr. Sam Illingworth to give him my full title. I'm an associate professor at Edinburgh Napier University, and my work really revolves around developing learning and teaching strategy, and my research has always been grounded in developing dialogues between different communities, normally using an arts-based approach, so through creative media such as poetry and games. And a lot of my work is also grounded in ensuring that marginalized and underserved communities have their voices platformed. So with the advent of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, Bard, etc., I feel as though the work that I do offers a unique insight into maybe pushing back a little bit against some of the hyperbole that exists and using that to refocus and actually think about some of the real dangers that are inherent in these technologies, as well as the opportunities as well. And as an educator, researcher, creative, and above all, human being, I believe that I'm well positioned and also excited to explore the ways in which artificial intelligence can and will change our education system, and also in establishing our own kinds of barriers to ensure that the ways in which it does change the education system are within the bounds that we ultimately permit.
Before we talk about the potential dangers, can we just quickly address what are the dangers of hype? What are the dangers of us getting too overexcited about it or being inaccurate with it? What happens if we just listen to the hype?
The danger of the hype in both directions, both artificial intelligence is going to result in Skynet, not true, and artificial intelligence is nothing to worry about, also not true. And I think a lot of the time in which it's presented, especially in the mass media, for many reasons, such debate loses its nuance. And there's very important nuances there that needs to be discussed. And the main reason for this is that by doing so, what always happens in these circumstances is that we focus on the extremities, which means that actually the real issues, which are very nuanced, which are not black and white at all, sneak through. So we can go into more detail later, but one of the biggest issues really is the ethics, but in particular, the inherent bias that exists in these algorithms. So thinking about education for a second, people always talk about, plagiarism, they're going to use it to plagiarize. Children and students have been plagiarizing since time immemorial. Like even going back to, the 1920s, people would ask their parents to write their assignments for them. So actually, it's an issue, but we can develop software. We know that plagiarism is an issue. It's actually the onus is on us as educators to design assignments that students don't want to plagiarize. And for those students that do plagiarize, for us to understand why. Like, why are they plagiarizing their work? Is it because they have huge caring responsibilities and massive pressures from home to get a high degree? Is it because the assignments we've designed are rubbish? Like, why is it? Why are we not asking these people? We're just making assumptions. And that's why I don't think plagiarism is really the biggest issue here. For me, in terms of education, the biggest issue is the fact that ChatGPT, Bard, etc., they are in danger of proliferating the hegemony of Western male white thought within our education systems. So a lot of very good work has been done in the past decade or so in diversifying the curricula. Some people might say decolonizing the curricula. I'm, because of my positionality, not in a position to use that phrase. But I think that diversifying the curricula is something we should all be doing beyond the box ticking exercise. And part of the reason for that is that the stories that we tell, the science that we tell, it's all grounded in these, especially with certain scientific subjects like old colonial pasts, which are unfair, which are unjust, and which are boring and uninspiring. And the problem is that a lot of the algorithms, which we don't have access to, are created by Western white men. And the internet is dominated by Western white men. So what happens is that even though we're trying very hard to diversify our curricula, if students are using artificial intelligence as a way to develop model answers, etc., they're becoming biased by the machines to proliferate that inequity of knowledge, of thought. And Western scientific thought is one way of addressing global issues. Some might say, given, for example, the climate crisis, it's not really the most effective way of tackling such global, interdisciplinary, wicked problems. So that's what I mean by nuance. When we worry about the hyperbole, about the tabloid articles that ChatGPT is going to steal my job, it's going to lead to exams being worthless, there's an element that part of that might be true, but actually the far more nuanced debates and the ones that I'm interested in and that we really should be worried about are understanding how ChatGPT and how we can challenge its lack of diversity, and also how we can upskill our students and their colleagues, families, etc., to challenge the information that's there. Artificial intelligence, strong, weak, whatever format, is here to stay. And it's very important that we train our students for the workforce, because universities are not there to stick our heads in the sand. They're there to adapt. They're there to be organic. But in doing so, we need to demonstrate the tools and to help our students to understand that there are limitations, that there are issues with it, just as we should also help our students to understand that the person stood at the front of a traditional lecture theatre has their own fallibilities, isn't always right, and that actually our role is to help those students and our students to challenge norms, to analyse and to problem solve and to have critical thinking for themselves.
This sounds like high-stakes stuff. Any precedent for this?
I guess it depends where you look. The printing press. There's always been moments in human evolution where people have worried about technology. People originally thought that the written word would do away with oral histories and the dangers that were inherent there. People thought television would, erode our brains. It's not the case at all. I think that artificial intelligence, and we're talking about weak artificial intelligence at the moment. We're not talking about strong artificial intelligence yet. But I think that we're certainly at a crossroads. But technology happens. Look at all the different technology that exists at the moment. Stem cell research. There's many, many different examples that we can think of. I guess with, in particular, ChatGPT and Bard, the entry point for users is so low that that's maybe where people might perceive it as being an issue. But that's why it's really important that we don't just stop people from using it, but rather we educate them to better understand the limitations as well as the possibilities that exist there as well.
Is the global education industry ready for this?
Yes, but that's such a difficult term, because what is the global education industry?
What is the global education industry, Sam?
Well, education exists in every country. Accessibility to education exists in every country. And what I would say is that, the internet, let's take a step back and let's look at the internet, and let's look at my smartphone, I actually have in my hand basically access to the entirety of human knowledge, which is phenomenal. And, we can talk about digital equity and we can talk about digital poverty and high-speed internet connections, etc. But theoretically, even in countries where certain demographics, women, suppressed ethnic groups, have been denied an education, they have access to an education through the internet. And again, slightly more nuanced, not all countries can access the internet in the same way that we can in Western countries, but still, that is huge. And what that means is it removes some of the power from traditional academic institutes. Also makes us think about what is the purpose of a university, okay? The purpose of a university, in my opinion, is certainly not to teach our students how to pass exams. It's not to teach our students how to write 10,000-word dissertations that they're never going to use again. The purpose of universities, in my opinion, are twofold. One, to prepare our students for an ever-changing workplace. And two, to prepare our students to be good human beings, to introduce them to a variety of thought, a variety of understanding, a variety of people. And again, I'm speaking from a position of privilege where I live in a country, the UK, where we're able to do that to a large extent with our education system. Now, I would argue that the potential for ChatGPT and Bard, especially when we think about some of the add-ons that are already existing, people are programming it so you can use it in WhatsApp, etc. This is amazing. This is like, and people are looking at already developing with like Wolfram Alpha and things like that. This is genuinely transformative in a positive way, as I think that it could potentially open up even more the potential for equitable access to information. But the challenge that it poses is what that information looks like, and making sure that, and again, it's nuanced. It's not just saying, oh, one ChatGPT bot got taught to sound like Hitler. Okay, great. Yeah, it might have done, but that kind of stuff we can easily spot. It's those nuanced issues. It's that inherent bias. It's that inherent racism, misogyny, etc., that we need to really challenge. So when we think about our students and the global education system, what we need to think about is how we are tackling it, again, without hyperbole. And the first thing we need to do is to ask our students how the hell they're using it. Because it's really rude and offensive and presumptuous and hierarchical to assume that our students are using it to cheat. I don't think they are, but people haven't asked them yet. So let's talk to our students. And then this opens up another can of worms, because again, people might argue that when we move to the digital to a very large scale because of COVID, this was an opportunity for universities to rethink assessments, to rethink about what they were. And lots of colleagues across the world in the global education system had very, very busy schedules and worked incredibly hard. But I don't think we used that opportunity. And actually, we kind of just tried to fit everything we'd already done, the whole sage to stage lecture theatre in the 1700s onwards, into a digital format without critically rethinking. This is an opportunity for us to think, what is higher education? What is education? What is the purpose of education? And the challenge to the global education system, if such a thing exists, is the challenge to everybody involved in it, that actually now's an opportunity to maybe challenge that status quo, and to think that even though we do some things very, very well, there's other things that we might want to improve, given the past 400, 500, 600 years of learning how education does and does not work.
Are large language models students when they're being taught by the technicians? And also, this does lead to another question. My understanding is that the way the large language models are taught are trade secrets by the private companies that are developing this. So the way they're being taught, and I use that word because that's the word that we're told they're using, that these models are being taught. Are these large language models students in that respect? And isn't there some kind of responsibility there that we're imparting the right information? And if so, do you know who these teachers are who are teaching the large language models?
We need to really think carefully about what these large language models are doing. I'm not an expert in this particular area. I know what neural nets are, etc., but I don't know what they look like. And the purpose is no one knows what they look like. Now, this is a very, very difficult point because on the one hand, companies rightly should be entitled to intellectual property of their design. And we might consider exactly how these large language processing models work to be the equivalent of the recipe for Coca-Cola, right? Like, why should everyone have access to it? But the other thing is that actually, throughout history, what we know is that the more that you open things up, the more potential there actually is for profit as well. So my challenge to these large corporations like OpenAI, like Google, and some of these that I'm doing it already, would be to make everything open access and open source. And I don't think that Elon Musk is exemplary in everything that he does. But I think that something that he's done that's quite brave recently is opening up the algorithms for Twitter to open source so everybody can see what's going on, even if some of it was a bit sketchy and pointed people to, point the finger at Elon. I think that's a brave thing to do. And if he could do it, why can't other companies do it as well? And the challenge on them is to think you can still commodify this work, right? You're not, just by making it open source doesn't mean that everybody's going to go out and copy it and use it. Companies still make money on paracetamol, for example. Like the margins might be smaller, even though the intellectual property doesn't exist anymore. So, and there's also an argument to be made that how much money do these organizations really need to make? So my challenge to them would be to open it up, because you can't just do something behind closed doors purely. Well, you can, of course you can, because you're a global conglomerate. But I would welcome you as educators, as technophiles, as technocrats, to really think about how to do this and the benefits that can come from there as well, because ultimately these are still small teams of people compared to the global population. Putting things open source means that everybody can work on them and improve them and use them and utilize them going forward. And until the corporations do that, I think that their mission statements, if they're talking about promoting the good of humankind, which might be very true, or in their heads true, is a little bit tempered. So yeah, it's a huge challenge. And of course, I'm able to say this because I don't have any stake in these companies. And I understand that these companies still need to be able to turn a profit. But opening them up, I think, would have huge benefits and would also help to demonstrate what does this black box look like and where are the biases. And what do those biases look like? Because unless we know them, we can imagine what they might be, but it's very difficult to then counteract them as we go forward.
You make a good point. You're not a part of the technology industry, so you can comment in that way, but we're all part of society. Do we have faith and confidence in the government that they're handling this in the correct way at the moment?
The UK government?
We could talk about the UK government if you want to talk about that specifically. I'm just thinking any government.
I would argue that in any country, it's very difficult for the public sector to keep up with the private sector, with some allowances. Good example of this, recent post for the head of cybersecurity in the UK for the UK government, job posting of about £50,000 to £60,000. Now, for many people, that is a very, very high salary. I'm not saying it's not a high salary, but for the industry, that's about a tenth of what you would expect that to be. So if the government, and you're speaking again about the UK, because that's where my expertise lies, is unable to attract the very, very best people working in this field, in some instances, then how can they possibly compete? And we've seen in many instances, the US and the UK as well, how previous issues with, the Cambridge Analytica farce, social media companies, etc., tech companies run rings around government organizations because they know how it works. They know, and they can afford extremely expensive lawyers as well. So again, there comes an issue of reconciliation as well. As a government, you can't just be saying, stick, 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 stick. There needs to be a willingness to engage, and again, not just a open door policy as well, but rather, look, we know that this can be transformative. We know that there are issues as well. How can we work together collectively to ensure that your product's protected, but also that it's opened up and that our citizens are informed as to its limitations, challenges, and opportunities in an informed way? But doing so would also require engagement with the mass media, and one would argue that previous UK governments, not just the current one, but also like the Tory party, but also Labour as well, don't have the best track record when it comes to information technology. One need only think about the Horizon scandal of the post office, or the massive, for want of a better word, club of integrated IT systems in both the police and the NHS, to think that this isn't where the expertise lies. And I think that part of that might be because of the difficulty in attracting the absolute top people to those roles.
Are we saying then that if action isn't taken, that we are going to see problems quite soon? Because if we're saying that the government, the UK government, or indeed most governments, don't have a terrific track record of carrying out large technology projects successfully, then there's very little to give us confidence in that happening in the near future. What problems are we going to see? What inevitable things? We've talked about trust and bias, and how perhaps by ingesting a colonial past creates a colonial future. If all you're doing is ingesting a history book that gives the past as it is, what are we going to see if we don't make changes?
I think one of the biggest things that we'll see if we don't make changes is a further divide. So if we think about digital poverty and digital equity, we need to be very careful about the forced migration of everything being online, because the people that ask for those things often speak in a position of privilege. And I remember a while ago, Labour government getting lambasted for wanting to make sure that everybody had access to Wi-Fi as a human right. But I think that's a very good policy. If we think about education, for example, how we can't just assume that look at the pandemic. There were children that had one laptop between 6 kids with no Wi-Fi connection versus children with high-powered computer gaming machines and 300 megs a second download. How's that fair? How's that equitable? And likewise, I think that unless we really carefully think about the challenges and the opportunities that these machines make, we're just at a risk of introducing further inequity. I don't think artificial intelligence anytime soon is going to be replacing hundreds and hundreds of jobs, but I think that people who are well versed in using artificial intelligence, writing effective prompts, etc., they will be replacing people who are unable to do so. So one of the biggest dangers we probably face thinking about this is a lack of upskilling. And there are definitely certain jobs that are going to be more at risk. So maybe what we should do is conduct a study, which other people have already done, in terms of what jobs are the most at risk, and then work with those communities to see how, in the ever-changing environment, the human element, of which there will always be an important role to play, can help and still be useful. So if we continue to stick our head in the sands or just talk about it in hyperbolic way, which is the same as sticking our head in the sand. We're missing an opportunity to engage. And I think that if we don't do something about it, by which I mean educate all of our citizens, listen to the needs of all of our citizens in a two-way dialogue, then there's a danger that digital disparity will continue far beyond what it exists like at the moment.
I can see that as a simple thing. Absolutely. Just privilege, rampant privilege amongst a small number of people. And I think if we're talking about education systems, I think we could say that the private education system, public education system has been in that kind of argument for a long time, hasn't it? And so, yeah, rampant privilege, I can see that being a very simple problem that might be coming down the line quite soon, I would imagine. I mean, if it's just a case of, you have to pay for access and it costs this amount of money, well, straight away that means that anybody that doesn't have any money ain't going to get it. Or if you require an enormously fast internet connection in order to meaningfully interact with these things, again, that's going to rule out a lot of other people. And as you say, all of a sudden that makes things like universal broadband access less of a joke, less of a nice to have, and more of a, oh, hang on a second, we do actually need this, because if we don't have this, then those people down the road have an enormous advantage over us.
Exactly. I mean, and speaking from my own positionality, I live in the Pentlands in a very, very rural location. We don't have broadband, but I am in a position of privilege where I can afford to have satellite internet because it's a necessity for my job. Not everybody has that. And so I think that is something that's going to be, in the short to medium term, one of the biggest issues that we face unless we do something about it. I honestly think that medium to long term, issues like Skynet, issues like the singularity, they're hyperbole. That it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen like that. And again, that's a very easy picture to paint, and it's too hyperbolic, and the nuance and the subtlety gets lost. What's going to happen is that there will be this disparity, and this. I mean, look at where we are as a global situation in terms of, there's never been a greater disparity between the people that are in utter poverty and people that are morbidly obese, people that have hardly, the people that have hardly any money, the people that have more money than they will ever be able to spend in several lifetimes. There's a danger here of this continuing, but that's a nuanced conversation that's very difficult to have, and having so forces us to challenge the elite, many of which have their own agenda. And I'm not going full conspiracy theory here at all, but many of which are, control elements of the mass media, are in positions of power within governments, are in positions of power in large conglomerates. So what's easier for them, to get everybody worked up talking about a singularity in Skynet, or for them to be like, oh, what we really don't want people to look at here is the fact that this might cause even more of a disparity between the rich and the poor. And we don't want that, because we still want to be the people that have everything. And that, again, is where education plays a huge role, because what it does is it encourages our students and citizens to challenge and to say, hold on a second, why am I being fed this? And why am I being told this hyperbole? And I know I keep using that word, but it's the only word to describe it. Why aren't I being given more nuance? And we don't do nuance well. Humans can do nuance very well, but it doesn't sell papers. It doesn't make manifesto pledges. It's not a big five that we can go out and claim that we're going to do and then not do. You don't paint it on the side of a bus, for example, right? Nuance. You don't do that. But maybe that's what we should be doing. And certainly for me, that's where education and educators play a huge role in helping our students and, broadly speaking, citizens to challenge and question why the narrative is as it is and who that narrative is suiting.
I'd like to posit a positive scenario that, again, just naturally springs to mind, although it does require every teacher in the world to lose their job. So in the future, when we've established the databases of information and we've made sure that there's no bias in there and we're happy with that, and when we have a fast enough internet connection and the processing power is there, doesn't that mean that myself as a student somewhere in the developing world could have access to all the teaching support powered by AI that would allow me anywhere in the world to compete on a level playing field with everybody else in the world if we were on that level playing field? What I'm trying to say is, the flip side of it being a problem is, could we not see that this could bring the education for all that you're looking for, but truly for all? Is that possible?
I think I'd challenge the fact there'd be no need for teachers, because you still need to have educators to have the look, right, I can learn guitar by myself, but having a guitar teacher really helps me to work out what I'm going wrong, like where I'm going right, and it helps to streamline that process. It's the same with any topic. Of course you can self-learn, and I'm not just saying this because I want people to go to uni. Like, university isn't for everyone, but there'll always be a role for educators, human educators, because they understand the human experience, and like that goes much more than lines of code and regurgitation of information. And we're not at a stage yet where we have strong AI, and we're not, we've got artificial intelligence that can pass the Turing test, but the Turing test, much as I love Alan Turing, isn't really designed to do everything that it needs to be able to do. It misses that nuance. Of course, people can design things so that it passes a test, but what we really need to think of is that equity. But I would say, again, challenging you, that with the advent of the internet, there is already in place, theoretically, the possibility for that equity to exist. But why doesn't it? Well, we know why it doesn't, because certain people don't want that to be the case. So it's like that whole thing of, theoretically, a communist society might be a very good one, but it requires human beings to be infallible. And if they're infallible, then we might not need that communist society in the first instance, because we've already got infallibility and the fact that everybody gets along and sees each other as equals. Same with this, theoretically, but it requires a utopian society that just will never exist because of the inherent selfishness of humankind.
I would say that, I agree, by the way, we don't need to get rid of all the teachers. We need more teachers. We need good teachers. And I would suggest that one of the roles that teachers fill is to be a mentor. People remember good teachers. People remember bad teachers, but people have fond memories and will often attribute their success to good teachers. So there's a lot of emotion involved there. What happens when people develop emotions for these, whatever the AI is in the future? I'm not saying do they love, I'm saying what happens when the humans project that emotion into it?
That's probably my favorite AI film, actually, Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix, which explores this very thing. And I don't see a problem with that. Like, especially, again, let's think about the nuances that exist there. What about people that are lonely? So, perfect example, elderly people living by themselves. It's been shown scientifically that living by yourself has the same physical detriment to your body as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Okay? So if we can develop ChatGPT, Bard, artificial intelligence to be empathetic and provide that support for people, why shouldn't we? And again, it speaks to the narrow-mindedness of people that we should prescribe because we have our own views on what love should be, grounded in some kind of, I don't know, some kind of Western thought again, that actually no, like, what is love and what is companionship, and who is it for me as somebody who is in a traditional marriage with children and feels very loved, to tell somebody else that just because they're not experiencing or having that, that's not love. That's not right. And so I think actually that kind of, and a lot of work's been done on this already, but that companionship, that love, that emotive engagement is a huge potential. Again, they're thinking about equity, and it shouldn't just be a load of rich people in segregated, fenced-off communities in Florida that have access to this. It should be for all.
There seems to be a pace here, because you mentioned the film Her, and so that film was successful because it was a remarkable concept. Yes, I mean, people didn't go to that film because they'd been falling in love with computers their entire lives. That film was successful because it put forward a unique situation. And yet, within a decade, it seems that we're going to see the first people actually falling in love with these things. So there's a pace of change here that just seems to be unsettling.
But I think that might be hindsight, because I challenge that as well. I think that actually maybe part of the reason that film was so successful is it painted a future that wasn't too dissimilar to the one in which we were living. You know, much as I love Blade Runner, that's not what we're going to be like in that year that's already passed. Same with 2001: A Space Odyssey. And let's look at anything in terms of evolution of progress. There are people alive on the planet today who have gone from a horse-drawn carriage to the capacity for humans to almost be able to live on the moon, right? That is phenomenal. Let's look at what's happened to the internet and how that's exploded. Like, all of these things, like, progress happens quickly with the benefit of hindsight. And again, I think that we need to not worry about the speed of things, but really think about the speed of the technology, but rather think about what extenuating external circumstances in the globe have enabled this to be at this point. And that's more the questions that we should be having, that again, do not sell newspapers, that are not painted on the side of a bus, that actually enable us to think, if things are feeling a little fast, then why is that? And it's often not the technology, but it's, I mean, can you imagine what it must have been like in Europe in like the 1500s when the printing press was invented? I would argue that was way more transformative than what we're seeing now at the moment in time. And that must have felt like a hell of a pace. But did it feel like a pace? Or was it that the organizations of the day were telling people that it was a hell of a pace, because suddenly, by having access to books and education, it meant that people could challenge, at the time, those religious organizations that suppressed people for the benefit of individual wealth instead of global collectivism.
What role does popular culture have in this, Sam? We've talked about a couple of movies, and I'd love to hear any more movies that you watched that you feel have some bearing on all this. But it's a genuine question. What role does popular culture have in all of this?
I'd widen it more broadly and say, what role does art have in all of this, of which popular culture is one? And the role of art is to encourage us to reimagine things through a different lens and to get messy. And, you know, science in its broadest terms is very black and white, so is technology. Art is not. You know, art, to use my favorite word, is nuanced. Like, that's the whole point. It's messy. It encourages retrospection. It encourages contextualization. It encourages really difficult topics. And so popular culture, which is a form of art in a variety of forms, what that does is it enables people to think about it, to contextualize it, to reframe the issue. And again, not just thinking about films that paint things in a very, very dramatic light, but thinking about, you know, the middle ground. Another favorite film of mine, for example, is Moon. And I think that the artificial intelligence in Moon is a beautiful, you know, counterpoint to HAL in Space 2001: A Space Odyssey, because this is artificial intelligence that wants humankind to succeed, that is selfless. And it's really interesting because I wonder what it is about the artificial intelligence that exists in Moon versus that exists in 2001 Space Odyssey. I'll tell you what it is. One of them was programmed by a certain group of people. Another one was programmed by another. And I think that art, film, in terms of global reach, is a very powerful way of enabling people to see past the myopia that they are often encouraged to see through engagement with mass media, etc., and to instead see the subtleties, the nuances on their own terms, and to think about that. There's obviously films that paint artificial intelligence in a not exactly realistic light, like Transcendence might be one, for example, but there's always elements in those films where there is an element of truth and where there is an element of, okay, let's see what happens there and let's see how that might relate and let's see how that causes me to question and to interrogate something rather than to have the message accepted as it is presented to me.
If we're now talking about scaling things, and we already know that cloud computing has a cost, we're aware of that, we're clear-eyed about that, and we're now talking about basically just pouring petrol on fire to just accelerate things as quickly as possible. Where's the energy coming for all of this?
I honestly don't know. And I think that you're right. These are the conversations that we're not having because people are so obsessed with it's going to destroy our job. It's going to lead to plagiarism. It's going to lead to all these things. Same with crypto. Like, when we think about cryptocurrency, one of the big things that people don't talk about is the green issue. And again, how can you square net zero with the idea of having ChatGPT, of having all of these things? And I think that that's really important. I don't have an answer because I don't know, but what I would say is that is definitely a conversation that we're not having and that is getting missed in all of the other conversations that are taking place.
My take on the crypto thing is that it was supposed to take more and more power to make it finite, but big technology took that as a challenge and said, "Oh my dear, I will max this out. So what was supposed to be a natural limit just became a bar to reach." And my fear, and I'm sure that there are others out there that share it, are that if there is an uncapped energy requirements to this, then the idea of uncapped energy is just a ridiculous idea. We need to know what's happening.
Totally agreed. And this is why these are the conversations we need to be having with national governments as well. Not just saying let's pause all ChatGPT, OpenAI, weak AI, strong AI research for 6 months. Again, it's just such a knee-jerk reaction that's obviously got a hidden agenda there. Instead, let's think about what the hell is happening to our energy? Where is this coming from? Why and to what extent is this, for example, how does this compare to the energy of a small African country instead? And there is a finite amount. So how can we square that circle? And is it something that these companies even want to do?
The concern that large language models is our data and that it is processed without any check-in with us on that. That this is something that also gets to me. And I think you've also talked about large technology groups and them having their own agendas and such like. So what are the areas there we need to look out for?
I mean, there's obviously a huge questions we need to have in terms of ethics and data use, but I also think that probably rightly so, a lot of these companies are saying anything on the internet is fair use. I think a lot of times when we post things we don't understand, myself included, exactly to what extent that can and cannot be used. So again, that comes back to education and the role of education in that, when you're scrolling through those 20, 30 pages of permissions and then just hitting the tick box at the bottom, okay, but there's consequences. So unless you're somebody who reads every single one of those, who fastidiously does that, I don't know if there's an argument to be had. There's an argument to be had, but I don't know if you have a right to say you're not using my data. I think what we need to instead think of is to what extent, we know from the way that governments, especially the EU, are challenging social media and the use of their data, that there is precedent for this, but we need to educate citizens and we need to challenge organizations in terms of how we're doing that. But I think at the moment, they've probably got every right to be using a lot of the information that's there because it's probably fair use. Some of it's not, but again, that needs unpicking, which is another reason why we need to have open models so that we can see exactly what's going on there. One way of dealing with that might be to have an amnesty to say, look, you've probably done stuff. We're going to hold our hands up and say, we can give you the benefit of the doubt, say that it was naivety. If you open up the models, no one's going to be punished for anything. We're just going to have an amnesty there. So that's what I mean about the collaboration rather than just the stick the whole way.
Without getting hyperbolic, what's your end goal for positives or end game if we do eventually get Skynet? Where can you see this going? And it either fills you with absolute delight waiting for it, or it fills you with trepidation.
I think it fills me with delight, but again, it's really hard to separate my own positionality because I'm someone who's au fait with this. I know how to use them. I know how I can use it to benefit my work. I'm in an industry, academia, that is one of the least vulnerable because of original thought, etc. The need there. I mean, the need for academia is another question altogether. But I personally see the use of AI reducing a lot of my administrative tasks, helping me to do a lot of my work. But it's then about me using my position of privilege to ensure that other people have that same equity and that they feel it's not about a deficit model and not about educating people how to use it, but creating a space in which we can have open dialogues around what the challenges are, what the benefits are, what the opportunities are, and doing so in a way that's open, that's transparent, that's equitable, and that's fair.
I'm listening to the book Sad Little Men at the moment about the public school system. And a lot of this, it sounds like there are similarities here. The idea that there is a group of people that can effectively massage an entire education industry to their benefit. And if we take that at face value as being the case, then there's a genuine fear that it just will get co-opted into that arrangement, won't it? And that we won't see the benefits. But in actual fact, the fee-paying schools will see all the benefits, and the public schools will be effectively kept out of it because it's capitalism.
And this is why we need to be having these conversations, exactly that, to be able to say, look, if you just peel back the veneer a little bit, these are the conversations we need to be having. This is what's probably happening, or even if it's not happening now, this is where the real dangers lie. And let's really think for a second about what people are looking out for you, why they're looking out for you, and no matter what they say, do they really have your best interests at heart? And I think that, again, that's a huge role of education as the mentor, but also as just preparing people not to take things at face value and to question everything that they're told and to make up their own opinions based on their own evidence that they gather rather than something that's been given to them by someone who's more intelligent.
It does feel like a remarkable time for education, doesn't it? I mean, just the disruption that's caused by COVID, just upending the entire education system. And now this, and with the appropriate nuance applied, we can see these benefits. It feels like a remarkable time for education. From the inside, is that how it feels for you and your colleagues?
I feel as though, I don't know how, I wasn't there at the advent of the internet. I mean, I remember having dial-up as a child, but that must have felt really similar. Or, just the use of CD-ROMs. Imagine bringing an encyclopedia from, 50 volumes onto a single disc. I mean, that's huge. That's transformative. So I don't know, because I've only had the position that I'm in. And speaking honestly, education's full of things that happen where it's like, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. We need to react to it now. But I would say there's been incredible change in the UK. I mean, again, speaking from my position of expertise, higher education, I would say one of the biggest changes apart from COVID, though, has been Brexit, because of the change that it's had to the capacity for international students and the exchange of students and the exchange of information and the exchange of grants, etc. Certainly today, that's had a hugely more demonstrable impact than artificial intelligence. That might change. Yeah. But again, do people want us to be talking about Brexit still? Probably not.
Subscribe to the Hello Computer channel here on YouTube to hear more interviews with experts as the world comes to terms with thinking machines.